Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 2 of the Tree of Knowledge series as we are commemorating Arbor Week in South Africa. Today, I have a very special guest with me, and I'm sure you can see my excitement. We have the beautiful Shan Kamar, who is a global ambassador for World Merit and also Miss Earth India 2017. Shan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be seeing you after so long.
It has been quite a while. So myself and Sean actually met at the Youth Summit out last year. And we discovered that we actually have similar objectives when we found out, obviously, the link of Miss Earth. So yeah, Skyshine, Sean is from India. And she's doing some incredible work, not only in her role as the Global Ambassador for World Merit, but yeah, she's been so involved in her communities, just, advocating, especially for sustainable development goals and good quality education. So we are so excited to have her on the series. We are commemorating Arbor Month, but we are just gonna touch a little bit on what's happening in India, how do they commemorate environmental days of importance, and just share some of Sean's knowledge into why she fights for the environment the way she does. So Sean, I'm gonna jump straight into it. As a young woman and a public figure, how have you used your voice and your platforms to advocate for matters that are important to you?
I think one thing that I really like to do, number one, I'm so grateful that you've called me because it's been so many such opportunities, especially I actually started my career working in social development. So I was a part of the prestigious Teach for India Fellowship. So I moved to Mumbai and I was teaching in one of the biggest slums of India in an under-resourced, underserved school. So I started my journey with educating children, but I realized it's with Miss Earth that people started to get to know me a little bit, and it opened up a platform for me to be talking about things that I care about. And that very clearly for me, through my own life experiences, was the environment, education, and gender. So those three things are what I very clearly knew that these are the things that I want to sensitize people about, especially the youth. So I started looking for avenues to not only communicate, but also set examples. Like I didn't want to go out there and speak to children or speak to youth. I also wanted to just let them know what I do in my day-to-day life to make a difference. I also collaborated with, I think, over a dozen different organizations. A majority of them were in the environmental space. So I'm climate reality leader. I was a fellow for Climate Tracker. So I was writing articles about climate change back in 2016. And I also reported for them from the 5th Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum. I have been a volunteer for Worldwide Fund for Nature since I was 7 years old. And it's funny because like kids that small don't typically volunteer for Worldwide Fund for Nature, but it was just coincidental that I ended up being at a camp by default because my mother was there as a camp administrator, as one of the camp administrators, and my sister was also there as a young cub member or volunteer. And I am 5 years younger than my sister. So I by default had to go because my dad was not at home and I had to be there. So it actually started in a really funny way, but I think since then, like my first internship was with Worldwide Fund for Nature. My second internship was with a wildlife magazine. So just knowing all of these different organizations having those experiences really helped me to talk about different things within environment, because when you talk about environment, people usually think of very basic things, like they think about air pollution or they think about, trees being cut, deforestation. But within environment, there's so many different things to focus on, whether it's plastic pollution, it's climate change, it's biodiversity protection, forest conservation. So there are a lot of things, and because I got the chance to learn about them, I decided to use different platforms, volunteer and collaborate with different organizations. I also organized a children's quiz in my city to sensitize about 140 teens from this entire district about environmental issues and raise awareness with an organization here in my city. There are quite a few things, but I'm going to let you ask your next question.
That is not,
For a
that's
second.
not a few things, Shan. You have been and you continue to do so much just to, continue your advocacy. And I think, I mean, I've recently had the pleasure of meeting you, but just following your journey on social media and just seeing some of the things that you take part in and that you co-found and co-host. Just your contribution towards especially good quality education. It's just so amazing to see all your efforts and resources that you put into something like that. So I'm blown away.
Thank you.
And then your advocacy for the Sustainable Development Goals and the environment, why is this so important to you? And what are some of the campaigns that you are involved with?
So initially, when I started working in social development, at that point, there were just the Millennium Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals were not even, like, they hadn't been formed.
Yeah.
And, the signatories to the Sustainable Development Goals, all of that had not happened yet. So I'm talking about 2012 is when I started working in the education sector. And before that, while I was a university student, was when I did my internships with different organizations in the environmental sector, and in school I was very active in those causes as well. So I think when the Sustainable Development Goals came about, I think what changed from the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations to the Sustainable Development Goals was that the Sustainable Development Goals seemed more holistic and also seemed very approachable to the rest of the world. The UN had this in mind, that they want to involve everyone. This isn't just for organizations or governments. This is for every single person out there, especially the youth and children today, so that it's easy for them to understand what these goals are and work towards them. So when the goals came about, this is going to be really funny, but I actually got very attracted to them because they looked so beautiful. So just the 17 goals together.
Yeah. And so colorful.
Yeah, so the logos, like the entire picture of those 17 goals, it was so beautiful. And also the fact that it encompassed everything from education to environment to health to hunger to poverty, inequality, everything was in those goals. So the first time when I came across the goals, I just sat there and I thought, okay, so I've done all of these things. So I'm not specifically an advocate only for education. I looked at the goals and I said, okay, so I feel strongly about gender equality. I feel strongly about quality education, reduced inequalities. I feel strongly about, so I felt like I was connected to a lot of them already, even before they came into existence. And it was very natural for me to then jump into the wagon and say, this is very exciting, and why don't I take this and inspire other people to learn more about what these goals are and identify which one they connect with. Because, like I said, I was already working on some things, and then I got to know about the Sustainable Development Goals. It wasn't that I saw the Sustainable Development Goals and then I thought, oh, maybe I should work for this thing. So my objective always has been, can I make people think about what they're passionate about? What has made them angry? What has made them sad or upset? Which problem have they looked at in their country and said, oh my God, like that is so upsetting. Why is nobody doing something about it? And the answer to that question, more often than not, the simple answer is that if nobody is, you can. Right?
Definitely.
And so because of that, I was like, okay, can I make people connect themselves to what Sustainable Development Goals are by letting them know that this exists and they can be a part of it? And which is why I've taken on to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals.
Wow, that's just amazing. And then obviously, like I mentioned earlier, you are the global ambassador for World Merit. So just what are some of the campaigns that you do back in India, not only advocating for the Sustainable Development Goals, but just under the umbrella of World Merit?
So World Merit was an incredible opportunity that came my way when I actually moved out of India. So all of my past year, I was living in Bangkok. And I was working with an organization that provides opportunities for women. So these are leadership development, professional development, and skills development opportunities for women across Asia. And I was very excited about this job. This was at the intersection of education and gender. It allowed me the opportunity to work with an international team, to interact with the entire Asian region, not just my country. And so I was living in Bangkok. So at that point of time, whatever interactions I had back home were virtual. So the contacts that I already had. So there were a couple of universities. There was the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and based on international days of significance, like World Environment Day or another day or Women's Day, I would interact with people back home, speaking to them about these things at those specific moments. But in Bangkok itself, one thing that I was really excited to do was to make the most of my experience in that city. It was a new experience for me, and I wanted to get to know the people, the culture. I signed to Thai students. So I taught in the SOS Children's Village. I also taught the Girl Scouts and Guides in Thailand. So I was helping them to communicate with international crowd there and learn English. I also signed up for Trash Heroes, which I'm not sure if you're aware of, but I started working with Trash Heroes to clean up different parts of the city. And for people who don't know Trash Heroes, it's an organization that exists in different cities in the world. But what they do is they sensitize people about waste management, and so they also help out cleaning different parts of the city that they're based in. So I was a part of that as well. That was my way of connecting with other people. I thankfully had a couple of friends that I had done a program with. It's called the Asia Pacific Youth Exchange, in which I was initially a delegate, and then a facilitator, and then a mentor, and then a judge. So it was a local immersion program for people to learn about the Sustainable Development Goals in partnership with UNDP. And so through my connections there, I continued to facilitate or be a mentor for that program. I also had the opportunity to go and present to people working for this program. And together we watched, I don't know if you remember SEMA, SIMA movies that came up. So SEMA Studios is a wonderful organization that collates stories of social impact across the world in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. So I screened one of their documentaries and had like one of the discussions there. So whatever opportunity I got, I took it and I went for it, and whatever I could do in Bangkok, I definitely made use of that in my time there. Language was definitely a big barrier because it's largely a Thai-speaking country and I don't speak Thai, but it was a good learning experience for me.
Wow. And then Sean, as I mentioned, the objective of the series is because in South Africa, we actually have our Arbor Week taking place in September. And obviously, globally, the importance of trees is celebrated in some or other kind of way. So how does India commemorate tree planting, and what are some of the campaigns and projects that takes place in the country?
I'm so glad that you reached out to me for this specific event that's happening in South Africa in the coming months. And I'm grateful to you because I actually didn't know about Arbor Day before you reached out to me, and I got to read about it, and I immediately realized that, oh, okay, so Arbor Day is essentially something that we do in India as well, but obviously the dates differ, when it started differs. In India, it's called Van Mahotsav. It translates to Forest Festival, and it started back in the 1950s by a food and agricultural minister who started it. And it was just an entire week. It starts at the beginning of July, and that's because the monsoons are kind of taking over at that point in time. It's a good time to plant trees. So at the beginning of July, in the past few years, there have been millions of people who have planted trees all across India. It's 1 week long, and it's celebrated every single year. And I've taken part in a few of them as well, whenever I could have, especially when I've been back home. And the purpose is, again, to spread the message of conserving our forests and the importance of trees in an ecosystem, even in urban settings, how important it is to have trees. So I think it's almost the same as Arbor Week, but we just call it something else and we celebrate it in July instead of September. Yeah.
And then how involved is the community, but especially our kids and the younger generation in your tree festival?
So I think schools do a really good job of getting children together for this specific day. I think there may be many children who don't know about the day, but due to these activities that schools or organizations organize within their campus or within their community, there are many places where kids, youth, even elderly people, everyone gets together to plant these trees. So I think it's a good initiative for everyone. And yeah, it is. I think it's quite widely known in India, this specific week. And everybody almost does something. It's in the news. There have been some years then where there have been like hundreds and thousands of trees that have been planted, and it's been a big news. I think one thing that we need to do better is definitely understanding that planting the tree is great. It's amazing, but you also have to then take care of that tree and help it grow, because when you plant a sapling, there are a number of things that can go wrong in between planting that sapling and then growing into a tree. So yeah, I think I also have, I don't know whether this was during the Van Mahotsav period, but I have this picture of me when I was, I think, 4 years old, and it's my dad and me, and we're planting a tree together, and and there is a board which has my name on it, and I very distinctly remember it as a great memory, especially since I've seen that picture so many times, because I know somewhere there's a tree with my name on it. So that's a great feeling. So I think that also for kids could be such a fun way to learn about tree planting or the importance of trees.
Yeah, and then just to follow up to that question, and because you advocate so strongly in terms of education, in your opinion, is the environmental aspect covered enough by the curriculums and the educational systems? And that can be globally, or you can answer specifically from where you are.
I think enough is subjective. I think the education system now specifically, I think when I was in school, there was a little bit of communication around the environment. But now with youth advocates with the Sustainable Development Goals, I think in schools today, there is more awareness about the environment. I think one thing that I definitely think is missing globally is that we teach kids or people in general that you should plant trees, or you should do this, or you should do that, but it's not very integrated. And I think I always bring this up with whoever I'm talking about the environment to, that the way you impact the environment is a daily thing. Whatever you consume, whatever you do in a day, the resources that you use, you're doing it on a daily basis. The consumption is not a one-off thing that you do on Saturday, like not on the weekend. But the way that we look at caring for the environment, that's very restricted to when you have the time to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so we say, oh, okay, I have the time to volunteer, I'll go and plant a tree today. And I always say it's fantastic to plant trees, but there's so much of an impact we can make if we just change our consumption habits, or, just be aware of what's going on within your country, especially the governmental decisions that people are making, especially in India, because it's a democracy. There are things that citizens can do before environmental policies are passed. And I don't know how it works in South Africa, but there's always things that people can do. So beyond, I think that our education system needs to work a little bit on integrating environmental education in a way that kids today know that it's not something that you need to do by taking time off 1 week in 3 months of a year, but it's something that you have to consistently think about. And it's about changing your habits. It's about changing your consumption patterns. It's a lot more there's a lot more you can do to help the environment than planting a tree. But if you're planting that tree, it's a good thing.
Yeah,
and
we take the tree.
yeah, absolutely.
And then, Sean, I just have to ask, having been crowned Miss Earth India 2017, how has that helped your advocacy, and just how has that journey been for you?
I think one thing that pageant platforms definitely do is that once people start to recognize you, you have a bigger voice and you have a platform to talk about these issues, and people find you more credible to listen to. And I think that's very helpful. I think the pageant experience definitely opens up opportunities for me that otherwise would have been difficult. So I don't work full time in the environmental sector. I work in the social development sector. But I think how this helps me is that when I go to a school or university or any other place where I would like to communicate, or any organization where I'd like to communicate, it helps me to still be a credible figure to be talking about this because of my title, which I cannot discount in any way. Of course, as pageant winners, it is the responsibility of the pageant winner itself, or the participant itself, to make the most of that platform. And for that, you have to, environment is such a thing that you have to consistently keep updating yourself on it. You consistently need to know what's going on in the world, especially today, with the climate crisis being one of the biggest issues that our generation has faced and the next generation will be facing. Right now, we are in a pandemic that was also caused by trafficking of wild animals. Right? So it's again an environmental issue if you really go to the core of it. So there are a lot of ways and things that that can be talked about, but it's really important for me then to learn about them and talk about them in a way that's understandable to everyone when I'm getting the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and then I just have to ask this question because you've mentioned throughout this conversation about so many things that you've been involved with, that you volunteered for. So as a young woman, what is that thing that drives you and that keeps you constantly giving back and being part of the change that you want to see?
That's a really good question. I think for every person, there are personal experiences that they go through that stick, right? So for me, my biggest inspirations were at home. So my dad is a forest officer. So he's retired now, but for over 35 years, he was looking after the national parks and the wildlife in the state that we live in. And just growing up, like both of my parents, because I had the opportunity to visit a lot of national parks in India, I took it for granted growing up, just the environment or the forests that we have, the wildlife that we have. I took it for granted because I thought, okay, so everyone has a chance to see this. It's only after growing up I realized that that's not the case, and I was very lucky to have those experiences back in my childhood. And there's another thing that I mentioned about thinking about what angers you, what makes you upset, what inspires you. And if you really sit and think about those things, you can realize how much you can do in your own capacity. Obviously, I'm not saying that you completely switch your job, move full time into social development, environmental development. I understand that's not possible for everyone. Yeah. But I still think in whatever jobs you're doing, even if you're a big organization, consumer products organization, if you're in a leadership position there, you have the chance to affect sustainability within your organization as an institution that creates consumer products. So every person in some way or the other has the power to change things. I think it's a matter of sitting back and understanding, like, what is it that you are passionate about, what is it that makes you tick, and how you can change that in your own capacity. Even if it doesn't mean that you have to do it full time, you can change a lot of mindsets around you.
Yeah. And then, Sean, just to close off this conversation, what is that one message that you just want to give to, especially our young women out there? We are still sort of in Women's Month, and just a message that you would like to just share with everybody, just to encourage them and just inspire them at large.
For women specifically, this won't be an environmental message, but I think this also would not be specifically for women, but it would just be to support people around you in whatever their ideas are and the things that they want to do. I think there are, within our families or in our society, there are a lot of moments where just because someone was not encouraged to pursue what they wanted to do, they're unhappy, to not making a difference because they've been told they can't. And I just want to say to everyone out there, you have the potential to affect someone's life for the greater good for them to follow their dreams. Sometimes it's not about money, it's not about resources, it's just that people are stopping you from doing something, or you're not getting the right encouragement. So that's definitely one message for women. And I think I already gave my message for the environment, which is to not treat it as something that is separate from yourself. You affect the environment every day. I'm obviously not going to say, okay, go completely vegan, stop buying clothes. I'm not going to say those things because I know that's not possible, feasible. It's not feasible. But I will say that if you even cut down on the way you consume, that's going to make a huge difference. So yeah, that's my message, I guess.
Shan, thank you so much for making the time to be a part of this series. It's so wonderful for me to know that we have some international guests as a part of it. And to everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. I am always so in awe with everything that Shan is doing. I don't know how she finds the time to do everything, but it's always just so inspiring and motivating to see someone else also just out there doing everything that they can to be a part of the difference and just be a change maker globally, and help us better this world and protect our planet, because like we say, there is no planet B. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Shan, thank you so much. Please continue keeping safe. And yeah, it was absolutely wonderful having you on the show.
It was very mutual. I hope that you stay safe, and I wish you all the best for Arbor Week. I hope you get to plant a lot of trees this year. And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.